Welcome to the University of San Francisco. My name is Susan Evans, and I'm the Associate Director of Alumni and External Relations for the School of Management. If you guys want to take a seat, this is your, yeah. I first met Larry about 4 years ago. One of my friends took me to a dinner hosted by Salesforce. I didn't know anyone, and he promptly left me for his coworkers at a table next to Larry. I started chatting with Larry, laughing, telling stories, and there was a concert shortly thereafter, and Larry was in front of me. He took a picture with probably an iPhone 3 at that time, and mine was probably the first generation. And I remember that Larry's picture was very clear, so I tapped him on the shoulder in front of me and asked if he would email me the picture of the concert artist. The next morning, I woke up to an email from somebody named Larry Brilliant in my inbox. Needless to say, I was very curious to see what this last name meant. And like anyone from the Silicon Valley, I went on to Google to figure out just who Larry Brilliant was. And Larry couldn't be a more inspirational person to be researching. I listened to his TED Talk, which is award-winning, for his wish to change the world, his wish to end viruses and diseases. And Larry has, if you don't know much about Larry, I'm going to tell you. Larry is accredited for one of the first and last doctors to be working on smallpox. And it is the, so far, only disease to have ever been eradicated in our world today. Larry was asked to help start Google's first philanthropic Google.org, which he directed. And he is now the chairman of the Skoll Global Threats Fund, helping stop climate change as well as other pandemics such as the Zika virus, Ebola, and hopefully one day very soon, polio. He started the Seva Foundation with his best friend, Wavy Gravy, which helps cure blindness. He holds a Master in Public Health from University of Michigan and an MD from Wayne State. He also holds two very esteemed doctorates, honorary doctorates from two schools, one from the East Coast and one from the West Coast, Harvard and University of San Francisco. I'm so honored to introduce Larry, and the conversation today will be moderated by Father Paul Fitzgerald, who is the president of University of San Francisco. I'll let you guys take it from here.
Thank you, Susan. And let me add a word of welcome and thanks and gratitude for all who have joined us here, faculty, staff, students of the university, good friends, and of course fans of Larry. So a book is a major project, and for someone as peripatetic as you know, out walking around doing things, to take that quiet time to write a beautiful book like this, what inspired you to do this particular project?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me here, Paul. It's really great to see you again. And this university holds a very special place in my heart, and I hope it does for everybody in San Francisco. We're in the city of St. Francis. We have a university dedicated to love, named San Francisco, at a moment in time when we have the most amazing pope in the world, named Francis, in a very difficult time. And so we're here among friends at a very special time, and I hope that tonight we can explore a lot of those things. The book is only a part of it. And I think I've been writing this book for 40 years. When we eradicated smallpox and I came back and became a professor at the University of Michigan, I wanted to memorialize what the experience was. But not just the experience of watching the last case of smallpox or seeing the end of a disease which lasted at least 10,000 years. Because we're in a Jesuit environment, it's okay to talk about scripture. And if you think about Exodus and the plagues, one of the 10 plagues is svat. It means boils. It was most likely smallpox. The plague of boils that Job had, that was most likely smallpox. Why do I say that? Because Pharaoh Ramses V died of smallpox, and we had his mummy. Anwar Sadat's widow invited some of my colleagues from CDC to go and look at the mummy and take a little bit of skin off the face of the mummy, and it had the virus of smallpox in it. So this is a disease that has been with us forever, thousands of years. In the last century, it killed over 500 million people. That's not a wordo, that's 500 million. When I first came to San Francisco, in the carefree days of the summer of love in 1967, and we were frolicking and cavorting, 3 million people around the world died of smallpox. It wasn't that long ago. So I wanted to memorialize that. I wanted to memorialize my own experiences, which are weird, strange, but actually part of the career path of the 60s, just a little bit strange, looked at from the perspective of today. And that's what this book meant to me while I was writing it. And it took a long time. It's always hard to write a book. It's got your name on it and your face on it. It's really a complicated process. But over the last 6 months, as this election became so vitriolic and so filled with hatred and divisiveness, this book took on a different meaning for me, Paul, because it celebrates a time when, in the middle of the Cold War, a time that was worse than now. We have to remember, as bad as things may feel right now, it was much worse when there were 40,000 nuclear weapons facing each other on a hair trigger, and more than half a dozen times we came within minutes of blowing up the world. But even at that time, when the Soviet Union and the United States were fighting each other in thermonuclear battles, we were able to work together and eradicate smallpox. And not only was it Russians and Americans working together, it was doctors from 170 nations. And when we had our team meetings, there were Muslims and Christians and Jews and Hindus and Buddhists and Baha'is and Shinto and every religion you can think of, every color of Christianity. And I could go into a meeting of the smallpox team and look around like this, and it would look like the faces of a rainbow. You had people from Africa, tall blonde Swedes. You had ruddy-faced Mongolians, all lined up. Every language, every religion working together. And what has happened in this election season is that we are being made to feel that we are incompetent. We can't get shit done. That we can't do anything useful, that we can't work with people who aren't like us and don't look like us and don't pray like us or love the kind of people we love. And it ain't true. And this is a testament to the fact that there was a time when we could all work together and share a noble and common and inspirational goal and get it done. And we're still those same people. And that's why I wanted to get this book done now.
Reading the book, there are so many moments of tenderness when you're dealing with children in India and checking the palms of their hands, and obviously love has been a strong motivating force in your life, kind of wild love in the beginning chapters, and we'll maybe come to a few of those stories over the course of the evening, but also a deep and abiding love, which is not a feeling, it's a decision. And then along the way, because you've been so open and so attentive to folks from many different religious traditions, you say that you've experienced a few miracles along the way. Could you describe for us just a couple of miracles that one or two of these experiences?
Well, I think one miracle was that we did eradicate smallpox. And we're going to eradicate polio. We're this close. Polio is a terrible disease. Those of you who are of my age remember when the newspapers said polio cured, but that was just the beginning. It meant we had a vaccine. We had a vaccine against smallpox for 200 years before we eradicated smallpox. We've had a vaccine against polio for 70 years. But this year, there have only been 25 cases of polio in the world. Only 15 cases of polio in Pakistan. Nigeria is almost finished. We will see the end of polio. And the eradication of a disease is a miracle. And in the world that I live in, because I lived in a monastery and an ashram in the Himalayas, part of the career path of the 60s, my guru said to me, not that I would be a part of the smallpox program, that's not what's important. He said, God would lift this one form of suffering from the backs of human beings. Just pluck it out. You know, God would sort of look at us and say, you have enough things to deal with, I'm going to take away smallpox. That's the miracle. And the miracle for me is that I was sitting with my teacher, Neem Karoli Baba, in an ashram, and one day he just called me, out of the blue. Actually, it wasn't just that he called me out of the blue. We all used to sit around and meditate around him, except me, because when I would sit and meditate with him, he would throw apples at my testicles. Just to make sure that I knew that, he was watching, and that he called me and he said, meditation's really important. Prayer is really important. Devotion is really important. But I want you to do something else. I want you to go work and help to eradicate smallpox. I had no idea what smallpox was. And the idea that I would go and work in the United Nations, which was such a big word to me, the World Health Organization. Try putting those three words together, World Health Organization. And I'd never seen a case of smallpox. I never had a job out after medical school. So the second miracle for me is that I was part of that. The first was that we did eradicate smallpox. And I do believe that it's God's gift to us, that suffering can be alleviated. Buddha says that there will always be suffering, but he doesn't specifically say there'll always be suffering from smallpox. So there's an open window there.
In theology, we call that a loophole. Working with all kinds of people. There were a few Catholic priests you met along the way that were characters. Could you tell us? That's a kind of a self-serving question. I apologize for that, but...
Well, there was the good Catholic priest and the bad Catholic. No, I grew up in Detroit, Michigan. Anybody here from Detroit? See, we go everywhere. I grew up really Detroit, not the suburbs. You all heard Eminem say that 8 Mile Road was kind of the branding, and you know that. So I grew up inside of 7 Mile Road. So I was safely inside of Detroit by 1 mile. And right across the street from my house was this Catholic Jesuit University of Detroit. And it being a Jesuit university, it had a lot of attributes, not the least of which was the best baseball diamonds. Mm-hmm. They always got there first. They got the best land. They had the best diamonds. And my crew, which were mostly Jewish and Armenian, a lot of Poles, we wanted to get on that baseball diamond, and we would jump over the fence when nobody was looking. Every once in a while, a Jesuit father, in the old days, wearing those cassocks, they're kind of old-fashioned, would come after us and chase us. And we would have to be nimble enough to get over the fence before he would get us. And one day, one of those Jesuit fathers in the cassock came after me with a baseball bat, and I was a little bit slow getting over the fence. And that sort of became a recurring nightmare for me all of my life. I would wake up in the middle of the night, and if somebody, these trigger words, you think of all these trigger words. Somebody says hungry, you think of pie. Somebody says Jesuit, you think of a baseball bat. But when I was in the middle of the smallpox program in Bihar, India, and there was a place called Tatanagar, which was the home city of a big industrial company called Tatas, and there were thousands of children who were dying or dead at the railway station, and we were told that the rivers wouldn't run because of all the dead bodies. And I was in charge of stopping smallpox in this terrible outbreak, and I was very junior, and I was over my head, and I was unprepared, and I was depressed. and I was unable to do anything to stop the struggle that I faced. And a woman came up to me when my Jeep got to the train station, and because my Jeep had the seal of the United Nations on it, it looked like it was an authority figure. And I stopped the Jeep, and the woman came up and she handed me her baby and said in Hindi, "Big doctor, heal my baby." And before I could even think, she handed me the baby like an offering in a temple. And I involuntarily took the baby in my arms, and the baby was already dead. And I was feeling useless, helpless, despondent. And we would stay the night sometimes, because there were no hotels. We would stay the night sometimes at some of the Catholic hospitals. And there was one called Holy Family Hospital that was just a few miles away from this place. And we were always allowed to sleep in the patients' rooms if there weren't patients there. And I was sleeping in one of these rooms, and I was having a terrible time trying to reconcile a good and merciful and loving God with the pain of that child and her child's mother and the problem of suffering. And in the middle of the night, I snuck down into the little makeshift chapel that was on the grounds of the hospital, and I was on my knees and I was praying, and I don't know to whom I was praying, but I was praying, and I felt a hand behind me, and it was a Jesuit from Minnesota or Wisconsin. Maybe we'll just say Wisconsin for argument's sake. But and he said to me, "Can I pray with you?" And I said, "Of course." And we sat in prayer, and then he said, Have you ever had communion?" And I said, "I'm Jewish." And he said, "Have you ever had communion?" And I said, "Did you forget about the Jewish part?" And he said, "I'm game if you are." He said, "I don't think that God would be unhappy for anyone who wanted to enter into a holy relationship with him." And he gave me communion. And it was the most peaceful salve on a wound that I felt from the helplessness of watching all these children die. And I said to him, "This is the most meaningful thing I've ever had, and I presume you don't have a baseball bat anywhere hidden around here."
There are so many, brilliant and beautiful quotes throughout the book, but one I liked especially, page 229.
We will read responsibly.
Yeah. And I'll identify him. But years later, Dr. M.I.D. Sharma would attribute a lot of the success we had in smallpox to, quote, rules and regulations and routinely breaking of rules and regulations, unquote. And then you go on, "My specialty was the routine breaking of the rules part of the formula." Could you describe a situation or two about how you broke some of the standards of the World Health Organization in order to get something good done?
Well, M.I.D. Sharma, his name stood for Muni Inder Dev Sharma. He was a great man. He was Commissioner of Health for Government of India, which is a little bit like Surgeon General. And he was a huge, big, grandfatherly man. They say he had never taken a day off in 40 years. He was really inspiring, only saw good in everybody. And I challenged that because once in the same epidemic of Tatanagar, when Tatanagar became the worst exporter of smallpox, at least in modern history, 2,000 cases left Tatanagar, went all over India, after we thought we had eradicated smallpox, and peppered, and like metastatic cancer spread all over India. And I was sent by the World Health Organization to this town, and it was obvious to me that all these children, young men would come. If you think about Pittsburgh or Detroit, during the 50s and 60s, you could come from anywhere in the world and you could go there and get a job on the assembly line or go to Akron and work, making Goodyear tires. And Tatanagar was like that. And people were coming from all over India to get a job because the economy was bad. And then they would sit next to somebody who had smallpox and they would catch the disease. And 2 weeks later, they were sicker than they'd ever been any time in their life. And they only had one thought, which was to go home and die. So they go to the railway station and they would take this disease and they would bring it to their home and they would export it all over. And I saw that and I just realized that can't be allowed. I was 25. I had no authority. I was a WHO medical officer, but that didn't mean that I had any authority within the government of India. But I quarantined the city. I closed the train station. I closed the buses. I got the superintendent of police to issue an order making it illegal to leave the city without a vaccination. I got the minister of railroads to close down the railway station. And I had no right to do that, but it had to be done. And so I did that, and then turned out that one of the people who was forcibly vaccinated by one of the vaccinators happened to be a member of parliament, which was bad luck. And his uncle happened to be the chief minister of Bihar, which was more bad luck. And his uncle called Mrs. Gandhi, because they were in the same party and she was the prime minister, which was even more bad luck. And Mrs. Gandhi convened a cabinet meeting. The sole agenda item on the cabinet agenda was, should we kick WHO out of India? Should we kick the smallpox program out of India? Or should we merely kick Dr. Larry Brilliant out of India? And you can see from her point of view, the easiest course of action would have been to kick me out of India. In retrospect, it makes sense. I wasn't at that cabinet meeting, but Dr. M.I.D. Sharma was at that cabinet meeting, and everybody agreed that they shouldn't kick WHO out of India. That would be bad form. And so they agreed to kick me out of India, and she had a deportation notice made for me. Timely, right? That wasn't a sanctuary city like this is. And so the deportation notice is called a Quit India notice, and the Quit India notice was made up, and it's very pretty with my name on it. And as they were breaking up the meeting, M.I.D. Sharma, who had been very shy in that meeting, said to the Prime Minister, "Madam, could I have a word with you?" And she said, "Well, yes, Dr. Sharma." He was a public health hero. "Yes, what can I do, Dr. Sharma?" And he said, "I understand that you want to kick Dr. Brilliant out of India. I understand. But would you just do me one favor? Would you delay that order for 72 hours? And she said, "Well, yes, Dr. Sharma, but why?" And he said, "Because you are Prime Minister, you can do anything you want. You can kick him out of India, but if you give me 72 hours, I will adopt him. Then you will not be able to kick him out of India." So that created a bit of a stir. And she said, "I don't understand. What's so important?" And he said, "We need this young American, and we need all the young Russians, and we need all the Brazilians, and we need the Canadians, and we need all the people who've come from all over the world to help us. This is not a time to be blaming foreigners for our problems. We have the worst epidemic of smallpox in the world. You are being lied to. He's just the canary in the coal mine. Don't kick him out. Bring him here. Talk to him. Let's discuss what this means, and let's rally the troops around." And that's what he meant when he said that I specialized in breaking rules. Now, there was the other time that I'd been a hippie with the hog farm living on these psychedelic buses, so I kind of liked street theater. And it seemed to me that to get people to be vaccinated, sometimes they needed a little bit of excitement. So it is true that I rented a bunch of elephants, and we painted the elephants, and we got an airplane, and I was dropping leaflets. And it is true that by accident, when the airplane with the leaflets was flying back to New Delhi, it happened to fly over the UN offices, and I might have dropped a couple thousand leaflets on top of the United Nations office. It's theoretically possible that I violated Indian airspace to do that, and he had to save me then again.
Well, at least you informed them of your activities. You describe the experience of, you describe experiencing the peace of understanding love. Can you discuss a bit your spiritual formation over the years? Certainly it started with the hog farm. We can go back to Alcatraz, but we can go back to your childhood and the great formation that your parents gave you. But what were some of the great turning points for you in your spiritual growth?
Well, you've got my dear friend Clarence Jones here, and he knows this story that so many of us young people had this experience with Dr. Martin Luther King. I was 17 years old, and my dad was dying of cancer, and I was a sophomore at the University of Michigan. And Martin Luther King, 1962, October, spoke at the University of Michigan, and I saw a little note in the Michigan Daily that said that he was going to speak, and for some reason I was so depressed that I didn't think I would ever get out of my room at South Quad. Anybody know Ann Arbor? South Quad? Yeah, I was there. And I went and I saw Martin Luther King, and it was a terrible day. The rain was incredible. You probably know that rain is supposed to always fall vertically. In Ann Arbor, it sometimes falls horizontally. You just can't walk against it. And it was that kind of a day. And there's a photo in my book of this great big hall in Ann Arbor that seats 4,000 people, but there were only about 90 or 100 people there, and there was Martin Luther King. And we walked in there. The president of the university was horrified that so few people came, and Dr. King just looked out at us and said, "Right, there'll be more of me to go around. You all come out up on stage." And it was a parquet floor, and I went up on stage, and we stayed with him for 6 hours. And I had never met anybody like that. He talked about, of course, that the moral arc of the universe bends towards justice. But he said it ain't going to bend towards justice on its own. You got to get your fat ass out of your chair. You got to jump up. You got to grab that arc. You got to bend it. You got to twist it. You got to yank it down towards justice. And I was infected with the virus of activism. And everybody else who was there went to Mississippi that summer, or Alabama to Selma, or worked with the alphabet soup of SNCC and CORE. We joined the NAACP. We were changed. So I was first a radical. Then I became a hippie and came to San Francisco in the summer of love. And, well, it just wasn't fair to do to a young kid from Detroit, Michigan who had never seen anything before. And I certainly inhaled deeply, everything.
It's legal again.
I waited 40 years to tell you that. I've been very shy about that. And I got on the bus. You may have heard the expression, you're on the bus or you're off the bus. I was really on the bus. And we lived on some psychedelic hippie buses and went through the Khyber Pass. We traveled we did a Pink Floyd concert in Canterbury and then drove from London all the way through Turkey and Iran, Afghanistan, Iraq, Pakistan. In fact, there's a picture in the book of my wife and I at the Khyber Pass smoking a little something, and our psychedelic bus is there. And 2 years ago I was invited to be a guest of honor at the Pentagon and to talk about asymmetrical threats to national security. And I showed that photo at the beginning of my talk. And there were generals and admirals, a lot of brass. So much brass in the audience you couldn't see because they was reflecting off. And I said, I just thought before we talk about national security, I should show you that picture so we're honest with each other. Now you either know about that or you don't. If you know about that and you still invited me, good on you. And you're the Pentagon, so if you don't know about that, then we have a problem. And so I was a radical, then I was a hippie, then I lived in an ashram. But really, what made me feel that peace that you're talking about, Paul, was that when my guru held my hand and played with my beard and looked in my eyes, I felt an electric charge go up my spine. I felt a feeling of being in the right place in the universe in the right moment in time. And I knew that he loved everybody in the world at that moment, which wasn't such a big surprise, because if you're a priest or a rabbi or a minister or you're a lama or a rinpoche or you're a guru, you're supposed to love everybody in the world. What was astonishing to me is that in that moment I loved everybody in the world. And I didn't know that this machine came equipped with an on-off button that let you love everybody in the world. I didn't know where to find that switch. I didn't get an operating manual when I was issued this machine. But that was the magic, that I met people in India who could make you feel that you were really part of the human species. You weren't white, you weren't black, you weren't Jewish or Christian or Hindu, or you weren't from America or Bhutan. You were all part of this great mystery that we celebrate together. And that's the part that keeps me coming back. That's the gold standard that I keep looking for over and over again. And I just want to do one more thing in that way, because right now we're living in a really tough time. I think I get a dozen emails from young women who are 20 to 35 who feel like the whole world has betrayed them, and they're scared. I get phone calls from my Muslim friends wondering if they should leave. Friends from my friends from Mexico or Guatemala wondering if this country can ever be their country again. Gay friends who wonder, is everything going to be rolled back? And activists who say, how can I know that what I'm doing is the right thing to do? I mean, I was so impressed with Father Paul's discussion on sanctuary campuses, which I hope we'll talk a little bit about. It's so meaningful. But I want to give you something to take away, because it's what Gandhi gave away when he was asked this question: how do I know what the right thing to do is when it's a difficult time, things seem to be evil and wrong? How do we know that you're doing the right thing? He said, I will give you a magic amulet that will protect you from ever doing anything wrong. But it is not an amulet of gold with jewels on it. You don't wear it on your neck. You wear it in your heart. Instead of looking outside of you for the answers to what you do, look inside your heart. And ask yourself before you do anything, will the act that I am contemplating benefit the poorest, the most vulnerable, the most disenfranchised person that you've ever seen in your life? Think of the face of the poorest, most discarded person that you've ever known, the meekest, the weakest person you've ever known. Then ask yourself if what you are contemplating will benefit that person. And if it will, and you do it, you're safe. This amulet will protect you. That's Gandhi's magic amulet.
Now, you lost your guru in the 1970s. Maharaji passed. Have you found another master? Did you find other conversation partners just to continue to deepen these deep realizations?
You're pretty good.
I'm available.
Don't die on me. The problem with all these gurus, and then they all die off on you. I mean, it's a drag. I hope that it will begin again now. Somebody was joking on television. They said that this election is going to throw us back 60 years. And someone says, yeah, then we'll be in the 60s. Oh, that wasn't so bad. Well, for some people. When I met Martin Luther King, it was like I had never met anybody like that before. And I wanted to try to meet other people like that. And so I met Cesar Chavez. I sought him out. I invited him to come to my medical school. He slept on my sofa one night. Benjamin Spock became my mentor for 30 years. I went to his funeral when he was 97. Maharaji, Neem Karoli Baba, Ram Dass, the Dalai Lama, Karmapa. My whole life was spent trying to find Mother Teresa. I mean, you could just go into the room and Mother Teresa would be there and you'd think you were in the throne of God. I spent my life wherever I could trying to find great scientists. Bibo knows many of the great scientists that we've hung out together over the years. Pure science is like being in the presence of God sometimes. Trying to find people who would inspire me, who would remind me of that thing, that elusive moment. So I keep looking, and I keep sitting at the feet of the masters that I can find. And I'm not kidding when I say, this is a man whose feet are pretty damn good.
You've had the grace to meet wonderful, saintly people who are widely recognized as saintly people. You've also met secret saints. Could you share with us a little bit about the secret saints?
Well, I think of this guy, Zafar Hussain, who nobody would ever, you don't know Zafar's name, but Zafar was a paramedical assistant. He was a Muslim living in Bhopal in the center of India. He was poor. He was working cleaning sewage out of the water one day, and he was called to see a young man who was sick, and this boy had smallpox and he died. And he inquired the boy's name, and the boy's name was Zafar Hussain. And Zafar Hussain, my Zafar Hussain, watching a boy die of smallpox with the same name, transformed him. He became on fire. And for the next 20 years, every one of the Westerners who came to India were trained by Zafar Hussain. He never had any education. He was a secret saint to me. In Judaism, the idea of the secret saint is codified. And like much of Jewish theology, it has a bit of a humorous bent towards it. And the story goes that God was mad at humanity and decided he was going to destroy the world. You may have read about that. He decided that there would be a flood, and he called this guy Noah and said, I want you to build me an ark and preserve the species and the genomic material. Okay, he didn't say genomic material, but we can make it more modern. And Noah said, you're telling me you're going to destroy the world and you want me to save animals and people, but if you get mad again, will you destroy the world again? And God said, well, I might, I'm God. And Noah said, count me out. Why would I help you? And God said, okay, all right. Look, I don't really want to destroy the world again, but people are evil. And Noah said, well, if there's one good person in the world, will you promise not to destroy the world? And God said, no. And Noah said, in the famous Jewish way, how many good people will it take so that you'll promise you won't destroy the world again? And they haggled all night. And they came up with a number, and that number is 38. I mean, it's as good a number as any other. And in Hebrew, it's the Lamed Vav. And so there's an entire mystical tradition, Kabbalistic tradition in Judaism that is around the 38 secret saints, the just people, but for whose existence God might damn well destroy the world again. And so this idea that there are 38 hidden saints who you'll never know their identity, but they are amongst us. And as long as 38 people are just and good and kind and loving, God will not destroy the world again. And I think Zuffer was one of these 38. Of course, I don't know. But to me, that's always been part of the fun of reminding ourselves what Gandhi said. Don't just hang around the wealthians, the victims of sudden wealth syndrome, the people in Silicon Valley who made the most money, the most famous people. It's what Jesus said. I mean, Jesus said, you know, if I were to appear, do you think I would appear as the richest person in the room? I don't think so.
You've pointed out that we are in this very strange moment in history, not only of this country, but of the world. And, you know, Great Britain just voted to leave the European Union. France, you know, the contest for president is going to be between a right-wing person and an extremely right-wing person. And then we've just had a presidential election here in this country. In all of your travels around the world, you've been able to see the United States from outside, through the eyes of people from many, many different nations. What practical advice do you have to us today here in this room? What things might we do to help keep the best values of the United States, you know, front and center in the eyes of people around the world? How do we help? Yeah, tikkun. Yeah. How do we help heal this?
Yeah, tikkun olam.
Tikkun olam.
Heal the broken world. Well, when I was a hippie living on a bus, and we traveled through Afghanistan and Pakistan and Iran, Iraq, and all throughout India and Nepal. I mean, Wavy and I would go into every little village. I remember going into a little Kurdish village, and if it were a Muslim village, you'd go into the center and there'd be a sacred spot and there'd be a picture of Mecca. Mm-hmm. If it was a Buddhist village, there'd be a little altar and there'd be an image of Buddha. If it was a Hindu village, maybe an image of Vishnu. If it was a Christian village, maybe there'd be a church or a picture of Mary or Jesus. And not all the time, but maybe 2 out of 10 times. In Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, 2 out of 10 times. In the holiest place in that village, next to that picture of Mecca or of Mary or of Vishnu or of Buddha, there'd be a picture of John F. Kennedy. That's what America meant. Now, yes, there was Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Yes, there was the war in Vietnam. Yes, there was slavery. I mean, we could make a long list. Japanese internment camp. But aspirationally, we represented something magical and sacred and wonderful. And we need to build a country where a picture of an American president, again, can be in those villages, where the aspiration that represented by that story can be true again. That's got to be our shining light. That's the country we want to build. That's who we are when we are at our best. That's who we are when we believe we're all in it together. That is who we are when we don't build separatism, when we don't throw people out of our hearts. And that's what we need to do. And it's not easy. It's not easy. And we're going to be challenged so many times in the next 4 years. But if we have that in our mind, that that's the world and the country that we want to build, at least we'll know what direction we want to go in.
Thank you for that. In the late 1970s, you founded the organization SEVA Foundation, focused on blindness prevention. And your organization has provided nearly 4 million sight-saving surgeries to people in need. Tell us a bit about this important accomplishment, another great accomplishment of your life, and a bit more about SEVA.
So after smallpox was eradicated, I guess just like you climb a tall mountain, you want to do it again. Most of the people who had worked on smallpox eradication wanted to get back together again. I wanted to do it without the constraints of being part of a United Nations program, because it was wonderful, but it has its own set of constraints. I wrote an article with my wife in a spiritual magazine, which was called Quest, from the Crystal Cathedral, and we got $20,000 in small bills in the mail. And then one fellow, a fellow named Steve Jobs, sent me $5,000. He had lived in the same ashram I lived in India, and had heard that we were going to do something like smallpox again. So we called all the people together that we'd written about, and we tried to decide what we were going to work on. I wanted to build an organization that would take on the worst disease at the time, which was childhood diarrhea. My friend Wavy Gravy said that he would put on a benefit concert. You know, techies always got their phone with them. But he's not just a techie. You're looking at the techie.
Sorry.
You're forgiven. And he knows Wavy Gravy. So Wavy said, I'm going to do a benefit concert for this organization to get rid of diarrhea. We're going to name the benefit concert No Shit. And I'm going to get the Grateful Dead. I'm going to get the Jefferson Airplane. But we were both overruled, and the group decided that instead of working on diarrhea, we were going to work on blindness. So we did, and over the last 40 years, we have had about 100 of those concerts. I think the Grateful Dead, or the Dead, or parts of the Dead, or what's left of the Dead, have done 40 concerts. Jefferson Airplane have done concerts, Jefferson Starship have done. We've had more concerts, and we've raised almost $350 million. Aaron would know from SEFA. And it's our programs and our partners that have given back sight to more than 4 million blind people. With a little operation that puts a piece of plastic in the eye, an interocular lens, which for the techies and business people, this is a business school after all, we were told that that was inappropriate technology for the developing world. And at the time, those surgeries cost $2,500, and that interocular lens cost $500. But with our friends at Aravind Eye Hospital, we now manufacture 2 million of those every year at an average unit cost of about 85 cents. And so it's appropriate technology now that you can put one of those interocular lenses and get back sight for less than $1. I'm really proud of the work that SEVA has done, and Aaron and his friends have done, and especially the Aravind Eye Hospital in South India have done.
It's very impressive. I want to go back to the beginning, or near the beginning. One of my favorite scenes in the book, in your younger years, is your delivery of a baby out on Alcatraz Island during the occupation by the Indians of all tribes. How the heck did you end up on Alcatraz delivering the first, not only maybe the first Native American, but maybe the first person born on Alcatraz?
And I think this may be the last. Are we running out of time? Or are we allowed to have ML? Okay. So how many of you were in San Francisco when the Native Americans took over Alcatraz? So this may be a surprise to those of you who didn't raise your hand, but Indians should have been allowed to own Alcatraz, because the Treaty of Laramie says that any piece of Indian property that's seized from Indians, if it is ever declared surplus by the U.S. government, reverts back to the ownership of the Indians from whom it was taken. Makes sense, right? Mm-hmm. Except we didn't fulfill our part of the treaty. Reference Standing Rock, right? It's like whatever happens, happens again. I was an intern at Presbyterian Hospital, now CPMC, and I just finished my internship, and we had a columnist at the San Francisco Chronicle or Examiner at that time, Herb Cain, and every week he would say, there's no food, there's no water, there's no medicine, we need doctors to go out on the island. And the Coast Guard had an embargo all around the island, except the people who were breaking that embargo were the Jesuits from University of San Francisco.
Yeah.
I mean, they have no sense of authority.
Well, there were some faculty who had boats, too.
There were faculty who had boats. Well, I didn't say they swam. And the St. Francis Yacht Club, which you think of as, the la-di-da-di lot, they helped break the embargo. And so there's a stream of people going out to the island, Buffy St. Marie, the Grateful Dead, the Jesuits from University of San Francisco. But none of them were doctors. And this woman, Lou Trudell, who was 9 months pregnant, wanted to have her baby born on Indian liberated land. And it meant a lot. And no doctor would go there. There were a couple of wonderful nurses from the Medical Committee from Human Rights who went out there. And then Herb Cain began this drumbeat. Is there no doctor anywhere willing to go out there? What kind of a world is it? No doctor willing. And I thought that just was an ad that said, Larry. So I hitchhiked on one of those yachts, and I went out there and I lived on the island. And when the baby was born, it's a fiction that doctors deliver babies. You understand that. Women deliver babies. Doctors stand by and take all the credit. I mean, that's the way that's what natural childbirth is. So in all honesty, I was just there and lucky enough to be part of this amazing experience. And this young man who was born, his name was Wovoka. I got an email from him this morning.
Wow.
He's now 6'6". He weighs about 300 pounds. Played right interior linebacker at his college, and once brought my little son and gave him to Wovoka, who held him up like that, and I'm thinking about this little baby I do. So it was an amazing experience. And Wovoka is a magical name in the Native American world. Wovoka was the Paiute Sioux Indian medicine man who created the ghost dance religion that Sitting Bull and Geronimo were part of. And it was my first experience with the kind of community mystical magic that happens at an event like that. And certainly it was an opening for me for the rest of my life.
Okay, we're going to go to questions from the audience, but before we do, I want to do a lightning round. So these are like 7 quick questions, yes or no, this or that. Ready? San Francisco Giants or Golden State Warriors?
What month is it? Warriors. Ask me again in July. Giants.
Google or Facebook?
What year was it? I think that Facebook has an opportunity to play a role on the world stage right now, as complicated as that is. That we all need Facebook to succeed. And Google, which when I was at Google was in a different time and a different place, played that role. But now we need something that builds community and that allows us to not just see our own news feed, but to be part of the world's news feed. I'm optimistic that Facebook will crack the code. I hope so.
Wavy Gravy or the Grateful Dead?
Wavy Gravy is my best friend. I wouldn't have met the Grateful Dead if it wasn't for Wavy. But he doesn't make music the way Jerry Garcia used to.
The movie Contagion, on which you consulted, or the movie Medicine Ball Caravan, in which you were part of the cast?
So the Medicine Ball Caravan was a Warner Brothers movie, and I played a young doctor in it. We got paid every Thursday in a wood-paneled Chevy station wagon, and there were 2 boxes, and one of those boxes you could be paid with dollars.
The other was a barter economy?
And Contagion is a movie that my friend Jeff Skoll and I wanted to make with Steven Soderbergh. How many of you saw Contagion? Did you like it?
Yes.
Yeah, it's really accurate. You know, we wanted to make a movie that showed that the swine flu of 2008, which the media thought was overhyped. By the way, the swine flu of 2008 infected 2 billion people. We just got lucky. It didn't have a bad gene to kill a lot of people. But we wanted to make a movie that showed what a real pandemic looked like. I am deeply sorry we killed off Gwyneth Paltrow in the opening scene. For those of you who are going to ask, that wasn't my decision.
Meditation or red wine?
Tonight, red wine. Every other time, meditation.
The University of San Francisco or Santa Clara University?
Ooh. I need some Jesuitical dancing on the head of a pin. If you, I've had the pleasure of being at both of these wonderful universities. I think I'd put them together and say that the Jesuit community in San Francisco has been one of the most, and I'll say surprising because I just didn't know, one of the greatest delights of my adult life to be part of this extended community, and I mean that with all sincerity. It's just such a wonderful community, and I'm so thrilled that in my older years I was able to discover you guys.
Well, the feeling is very mutual. Want to open it up to you folks, so we've got some folks with microphones, please.
Hi, my name's Raghav. I'm from India. And my question is...
Hindi bolega?
बाकी लोग नहीं समझेंगे.
अंग्रेजी छोड़ दो.
बाकी लोग क्या?
हाँ.
जाने दो. So my question is, while you were traveling as a hippie in the bus, you went to so many churches or mosques and everything. Did you have, at any point of time, in that time, did you have a discussion with any person about God, and did it change you in any way?
I don't think you could go anywhere in India without having a discussion with everybody about God. It's in a way the best theological conversations I've ever had in my life were with people who were driving pedal rickshaws or selling in the marketplace. I'll tell you one funny story. There was a guy, Jerry, Chicago 7, Jerry, help me somebody. Jerry Rubin, thank you. Jerry Rubin. And I didn't know Jerry very well, but I had met him, and I was living in India, and I had a little apartment, and he had gone to China, and he was filled with Mao Zedong and what the Cultural Revolution meant. And he sent me an email, he sent me a letter, no email, what am I thinking? He sent me a letter, and he asked if he could stay in our barsati, in our little apartment, and I said yes. And he stayed with us for 3 or 4 days. And then as he was leaving, we took him out to Modi Mahal for some good Mughalai food. And we were coming back, and we got into a rickshaw, and the rickshaw driver was driving us. And Jerry said to for me to translate into Hindi, ask him why he does such demeaning labor. I've just been in China where they honor the dignity of labor. And I translated that, and the rickshawala said, it's all God's will. And Jerry said, tell him that God is dog spelled backwards. And I said, I don't think that I can translate that. And the rickshawala understood, and he said in Hindi to me, he said, did he just say that God is dog? And I said, no, it's worse than that. And he stopped the rickshaw, and he said to Jerry Rubin, would you please kindly exit my rickshaw? And Jerry said, why? He said, because you've just been telling me about the dignity of labor, and I will withhold the dignity of my labor from you or from anyone who will compare my God to a dog. And I thought, I think I just learned something that I've never learned in Sunday school before. And I think that India is, maybe it's changing, and when I was at Google, I would go back and talk to all the young people at Google in Hyderabad, and I once had 2,000 Googlers, and I said, please raise your hand if your grandparents were vegetarians. And they all raised their hand. I said, all right, please raise your hand if your parents are vegetarians. And half of them raised their hands. I said, please raise your hands if you're a vegetarian. Nobody raised their hands. And so that's one indication of how India is changing. But the conversation about God is better, deeper, more culturally part of life in India than any place. And you know the expression, Bhagwan jo kuch karte hai, hamara mangalam ke liye karte hai. whatever God says, whatever God does, he does for the best. There is a different feeling about God. And it doesn't matter whether you're talking about God meaning Allah, or God meaning Inder, or Vishnu, or Shiva, or Christ. There's just a different relationship in India that I love. One more story, which is that there was a guru named Chidananda who translated the Bhagavad Gita that I was honored to spend some time with him. 17-volume translation of the Bhagavad Gita, and he would do something called a Gita Yugna, where he would bring everybody together like a tent revival, but a Hindu tent revival. And he was once asked by someone, "How come you are always thanking God and never blaming God?" And he said, "Oh, I blame God all the time. If something goes wrong and somebody is suffering, I blame God. If something goes well and someone is good, I thank God, because it's all God."
Question from somebody over here, please.
Yes, Stephen Hawking reportedly has recently claimed that there are three great threats to human existence: global climate change, and global terrorism, and unrestricted proliferation of artificial intelligence. And I was wondering what you think of that list, and if there's anything you add or change.
Well, he used to have pandemics on that list. I don't know what gave him the optimism to take pandemics off. But you know, the artificial intelligence conversation is one that is too early for us to, I think, really have as a community. Although you'd have a better take on that than anybody in this room, I think. But to me, I think it's a little early, because I don't know what intelligence is, and I don't know what artificial is. But other than that, I'm on top of it. Proliferation of nuclear weapons and climate change, I would add cyber weapons. There's a whole new set of warfare. Anne Marie Slaughter, who's an amazing woman, she was Assistant Secretary or Deputy Secretary of State. She runs the New America Foundation. She's coined a term, the new war, because when I grew up, there were only two kinds of war. There were nuclear war and conventional war. And what she's saying is those are very kind of trite and artificial distinctions. We've been at war with Iran since the taking of American hostages in 1979, 1980. And that war has been a cyber war, a psychological war, an economic war. It's been occasionally assassination war. It hasn't been nuclear. But war is becoming not nuclear or non-nuclear. And I think that while the proliferation of nuclear weapons is indeed a huge threat, an existential threat, the control of those weapons, however many the number are, which is a cyber issue, is at least as much of an existential threat. And if you want to see a movie that will scare you, but also I think make you put it in context, it's a movie that participant did, my friend Jeff Skoll did, called 0 Days. And that's a movie. Has anybody seen that movie? I wouldn't think so. But you can see it on Showtime. It's really a movie about when Stuxnet grows up, the virus that Israelis and American intelligence communities implanted in these Siemens centrifuges in the Iranian nuclear plants that made them go wild and go crazy. But 0 Days, you know that one very well. It's not the film. Yeah, well, you're sitting in front of somebody who knows that world backwards and forwards, so I won't call him out and identify the three-letter agencies that he... No, I'm kidding. I tease him too much about that. I don't mean that.
Another question over here? Please.
Hi, my name's Chad. I had to ask you your personal experience with worship with a group of people. Can you tell me I'm not sure what religion it would be, but if you were around a large group of people and you're praying, an awe-inspiring experience out of all of your stories and all of your travels, whether it be Mass at USF or praying, in India. Can you share something like that with us, or
You
experience?
mean which one is best?
You personally, like,
Experience
that kind of stood out.
I unfortunately have this disease. I love them all. I still remember the first day I went down to Methodist Church on Woodward Avenue in Detroit, Michigan, to sign up to join the NAACP, and I walked into my first African American Christian revival service, and I stayed for hours and couldn't tell you how wonderful I felt. Nice Jewish boy walking in, totally unexpected. But I've also been in Jerusalem with kind of left-wing Messianic Jews. Amazing experience. I've been all over the world in Muslim countries. I've lived in 8 or 9 or 10 Muslim countries, and sometimes to hear the muezzin call to prayer in the morning it's just breathtaking. I think I've done, I don't know, 7 or 8 different fruit flavors of Buddhist meditation. I love them all. I still remember my first Buddhist meditation, which was in Gaya, where Buddha achieved enlightenment, and a teacher named Goenka. I remember going to a Jain monastery and living for 10 days in a Jain monastery doing meditation. And I've been on every pilgrimage, every Hindu pilgrimage in India, all the dhams and jyotirlingams, and I've been to Vaishno Devi, where you crawl half a mile into a cave, into a womb-like structure to worship the mother. I mean, I find it every one of those things opens up a little bit of the mystery more. I mean, listen, why are we so worried that we have different religions and different colors? And what frightens us about that? We should celebrate that diversity as if each one of us and the community that we're from has a piece of the puzzle without which we can't complete the whole jigsaw puzzle. That's the way I feel. I mean, I know I'm probably violating the tenet of every one of the religions by saying that, but that's the way I feel.
The mystical experience takes us beyond words, takes us beyond categories to this very deep place where we do, as you say, there's that electricity, there's that sense of our common humanity. We like to say in Catholicism that mysticism starts in the mist and ends in schism. I think we have time for one last question. Please, sir.
Thank you so much for coming tonight.
Thank you.
My question was about from a personal perspective, I'm a person who wants to do good and is trying to do good, but hasn't quite really touched into the that energy you speak of as far as being good. I was wondering if you've ever had that dilemma yourself, and if you could speak about it. And if you haven't, how did you fall into what you are and what type of being you're doing in the world today?
Oh, all the time. I mean, if life were a horse, I would fall off that horse 100 times an hour. I just did it 3 times now. I mean, there's no guidebook that. I've read every kind of scripture that I could read: the Bhagavad Gita, the Ramayana, the Old Testament, the New Testament, the Tao Te Ching, Dhammapada, the Talmud, the Torah. I mean, and every one of them teaches you something a little bit different to sharpen your focus, but they contradict each other, and they don't agree. In the end, it leaves it up to you and your heart. And maybe that's the way it should be, because each of us are we're branded differently, programmed differently, we're endowed differently, we're given skills and ways different. I mean, I do like the Indian idea of karma, and I like the idea that for every person, this is from the the Bhagavad Gita. This is something my guru made me memorize over and over again. That for every person, of all the different paths to God, there's one that's better. It doesn't mean the others aren't good, but there's one that's better. I think that may have been an editorial comment. And so I was about to tell you the secret of the meaning of life, but given that...
Thank you, Larry. Thank you, Father Paul, for joining us tonight. Big round of applause. Our USF bookstore has agreed to sell Larry's book at 50% off. So if you would like to purchase it tonight, Larry is willing to stay afterwards and sign your copy. It's a great Christmas gift. Also, on February 23rd, we are hosting Robert Merton, who won a Nobel Prize in Economics at USF. So please save the date. And thank you for coming out tonight.